Community Church. I serve on the board with Hope Center. I'm not actually on staff with them. So I'm do family ministries here at the river. So, can we go ahead? Are you good?
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
Anyway, so why don't you guys introduce yourselves and kind of tell what you do, and just jump in.
Sure. My name is Crystal Young. I'm the director of Hope Center Adoption and Family Services. And what we do as far as an adoption agency is we offer low-cost adoption services for domestic adoption. We are based here in Putnam County, but we want to be able to expand across the 14 counties of the Upper Cumberland. And so we've been working with families, 14 families that have partnered with us this last year for adoption-related services, for home study, for education and training materials. And it's just been really beautiful to partner with these families and hear their story and their desire to adopt, to complete their family through adoption. And we have also worked with 5 birth mothers this last year, just trying to support them in their decision to place. One of those birth mothers did decide to place, and that child was adopted this May. And then 2 of our other birth mothers decided to parent. And so it's just been really neat to see how all of this has come to fruition for us as Hope Center. The work started long before we opened our doors last August. It actually started, I always like to go back to the conversation between Jamie and Steve several years ago that they both connected on long before I knew really either one of them. And then a conversation that I had with a local pastor about 3 years ago as well. And we each left those conversations saying, okay, well, let's just pray about what it looks like to bring an adoption agency to Cookeville. And then in 2016, just through the wisdom and just discerning that the Lord was really calling us to this, there were several that kind of pointed us each towards each other. And we made those connections, and the Adoption Alliance was formed just basically a committee of individuals saying we're going to commit to seeing this adoption agency planted here in Cookeville. And then from there, we were able to come up with a name for ourselves. We came up with an executive board before the name, and then that moved us into being able to hire Jamie and myself, and eventually our doors opening last year. So it's been, a lot of work that has gone into this, and even more work with our doors being open. But man, it's just been really neat to see how the Lord planted that vision in our hearts, and how that just continues to grow and flourish before us, literally.
So I'm Jamie Thornsberry, and I'm actually a member here at the River Community Church. 6 years ago, I had the honor of becoming the founder of the Heart Gallery of Tennessee. We are the first and only Heart Gallery in the state of Tennessee, and we partner with the Department of Children's Services to advocate for children in the foster care system who are available for adoption. So these are children that have been pulled into foster care for various reasons. Their parental rights have been terminated, and now they are in full guardianship of the state. And our goal as the Heart Gallery is to see them placed in Christian families if possible, although we don't actually do the adoptions. Most of the places that we advocate in are in the church community. And then, as Crystal said 3 years ago, kind of for the last 6 years, Steve and I have been talking and dreaming about this idea of an adoption agency here to serve Christian families. And that's the unique thing, I think, about Hope Center, is we serve traditional 2-parent couples through the adoption journey. And then we work with birth mothers who are wanting to know more about adoption or make an adoption plan. The other unique thing I feel about Hope Center is that we do it at an affordable cost. The national average for an adoption, a domestic infant adoption in the country, is just under $40,000. And the way that we've structured Hope Center, we rely a lot on fundraising so that our families don't have to pay those exorbitant costs. Our costs are less than half of the national average, and that's very important to us. Christians, statistically, are the ones who are driving the orphan care ministry across the nation, and that's a great thing, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. And we want to make it as accessible as possible for Christian families to be able to fulfill the call that God has on their life to adopt a child into their home.
There you go. So it has been a neat journey. Jamie, and her family moved up here 10 years ago, I guess, and had been heavily involved at her church down in Florida with adoption ministry. And that had always kind of been a dream of mine, a vision. It's like, this to one day have. My wife and I, we've adopted 3 ourselves. And so that was very near to us, but we also knew that it would be great if there was an agency in our community that was doing this. I've been part of the Cookeville Pregnancy Clinic for many years, and we see that side of it. Women find themselves in crisis pregnancy situations, and as we would talk with them and encourage them, an option obviously is adoption, and we talk about that. But then, if they express interest, we had to refer them to Nashville or Knoxville or Chattanooga. And so it's like, man, it'd be great if there was something in our community. And so there was always that dream. And so Jamie, they moved up here. We got to talking, and she was telling me her experience, and I was like, well, I've always had this dream. And I really kind of thought it was probably going to happen like within that year or two, but that seed just kind of was planted and just sort of sat there for a season. And then, as Crystal said, just a couple of years ago, it just seemed like things started to sprout, here and there, and suddenly we started taking notice that, hey, there's a lot of people talking about this, and some key people are talking about this, and someone just said, hey, we should get together. And I remember we did, and then eventually just said, we met several times and talked a lot about it, and finally said, let's do something, okay? Let's do something. And so it was birthed. We're very excited about that. So so you're church planners, pastors, and so we were talking about, so what's the angle here, and what do we want to come at? So what I would like to do is just probably tell you something you already know, but I think it's a good reminder for us. And so, and Rick already kind of read this or quoted this scripture, and I want to go back to that and just in James 1:27, and I think, most everybody, if you think about, we're talking about orphans, children, you go to that and you think about what James said, and this is what he said. He said, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And I think that's the English Standard Version. Some other translations say to care for the orphans and stuff. But the word visit there, and James is a very, and I'm sure you read that, he's a very action-oriented type of guy, it seems like. He even says, hey, faith without works is dead. It's like, look, we got to be doing something. And it's interesting what he says there. He says that this religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is to visit orphans. Well, that word visit is really the key, and I think it's unique because it's used throughout the Scripture. And in a couple of places, just to give you the idea, I think, of what the Scripture is kind of compelling us and challenging us as believers to, is this. In Exodus 4:31. The story there, the people of God, they're in Egypt, they're in bondage, and it says they're crying out year after year, they're crying out to God, help us, deliver us. And in Exodus 4:31, it says, and the people believed. Aaron is telling them, God has come, and he's told Moses, here's what he's going to do. And it says this, and the people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had visited, there's that word, visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. There was great excitement because they'd been praying and praying and praying and praying, and now they've heard that God has done something. He's visited his people. He said, okay, I've seen your affliction, I've seen this, I'm going to do something about it. And of course he comes to Moses. In Luke chapter 1, in the whole story of really John the Baptist and his birth, and of course connected there with Christ, his father Zechariah, of course, we can't speak for this period of time, and then he opens his mouth and he prophesies, and he says this in Luke chapter 1, verses 67 through 69. And his father Zechariah was filled with the Holy Spirit, and he prophesied, saying, Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has, guess what? Visited and redeemed his people, and has raised up a horn of salvation for us in the house of his servant David. Again, here's the people, and here's God's plan of redemption that was set in place for the beginning of the world. But the time had come, and what does God do? He visits. He visits his people. He comes, obviously in the form of the Lord Jesus Christ, and I guess my point here in this is this word that comes back to James when he said, this is what pure religion is. It's to visit the orphans and the widows. Is what James says in chapter 1, verse 22, and he says, but be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. I think that's James' message to us, is do something. Take action. And here specifically, he's talking about orphans and widows, saying, visit them. Just as God visited his people Israel in their time of affliction when they cried out. And he said, we have no deliverer. We have no help. We have no one advocating for us. So God visited them, and he did something. In the New Testament, here's his people, and they're like crying. God says, I've got a plan, and my plan is to redeem my people. And so he does what? He visits them through the Lord Jesus Christ. He sends the Messiah. So here's my point in all this, as I've thought back on this over the years. To me, the compelling argument is this. It's not so much what we know, but it's what we do about what we know. Mm-hmm. You can know something, here's we know a lot. We know there's a lot of needs. I mean, think about it. There's statistics, and my numbers are old. You guys may have even some updated numbers. But this was from a couple of years ago. 150 million, estimated 150 million orphans worldwide. I know these numbers are probably not accurate, but it doesn't really matter because these numbers are so huge, I can't even get my head around it. 5.5 million children trafficked annually. And then most of these are some of the most vulnerable kids in our culture, in our society. 415,000 in foster care, and again, I don't know how accurate that is. I think at one point there was like 8,000 in Tennessee. Crystal would probably be much more up on that. But again, just massive numbers. 750,000 teen pregnancies annually. 30% of those will choose abortion. The point is, we know there is a vulnerable segment of our population that is really, I think, related to what James is talking about specifically with orphans and widows and these vulnerable in our society. We know that. The question is, what are we going to do about what we know? And again, I know there are other needs, there are other situations. This is not the only thing, but I think we do have a clear scriptural mandate here. It's like, you need to do something. God is saying, I want you to do what I do. When there's a need, when there's an affliction, I visit. I take action. I think one of the greatest examples, and this will be the end of my little sermon, but I think the greatest example, I've always thought about this, is really the story of Joseph as related to the birth of Christ. And let me just read that to you right fast here in Matthew chapter 1. It says, now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. It says, when his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. I mean, think about it. Think about Joseph. I mean, he had a plan. This was great. He's found this sweet little gal. He's excited. They're gonna be husband and wife. He's kind of got maybe this little carpentry thing going, and it's beginning to take off. And I mean, he probably had great plans. And all of a sudden, he finds out that Mary is pregnant. And Joseph knows, well, this isn't my child, because I'm an honorable man, and we haven't been together. Has Mary been unfaithful? The Christ Mary's like, no, Joseph, you don't understand. The angel come, and can you imagine? Would you believe that? It's like, seriously? But then here's what happens. So he was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna shame her like I could. I'm gonna put her, I'm just gonna do this quietly. But it says this, but as he considered these things, this is so good. As he considered doing something horrible, really, it says this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She's telling you the truth, Joseph, okay? He says, she will bear a son, and you will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. In other words, this is so much bigger than you even understand right now, Joseph. He will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and that son they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. And here's the key. So this angel comes and he says, Joseph, let me just affirm what Mary has told you. This is unbelievable, but this is really a big deal here. This is so much bigger than you can understand. And again, it's God doing what Luke talks about in chapter 1. He's going to visit his people. He says he's going to be God with us, Emmanuel. So Joseph, you're going to be a part of this. So this isn't your child, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up, and I want you to take Mary, and I want you to adopt this son. And I want you to care for him on earth as if he was your very own. You're going to be the protector, the provider of this young family. I want you to do this. And here's the key. When Joseph woke up from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but he knew her not until she'd given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. It's not about what you know, it's what you do with what you know. Joseph, God told him, this is the deal, man, and you're going to get to be a part of it. I want you, think about it, I want you to be my son's stepdad on earth.
That's cool.
And I think, and so the connection here with what we're talking about is, I think for a lot of people in your churches, in our community, the idea of adoption, foster parenting, getting involved in human trafficking, orphan, that is pretty scary. I mean, you're sitting there in your nice little existence. I've got I got my engineering degree, and I've got my job, I've got my family, we've got UT tickets. I mean, whatever that life looks like that you've got right now that's nice, and then somebody says, hey, you know there's 150 million orphans worldwide. There's 5 million kids trafficked every year. There's thousands of kids in foster care right now. These are vulnerable children crying out that they need help. Who's caring for them? And then to hear that, and to hear that possibly I'm supposed to consider that, adopting a child, fostering children, getting involved in orphan care, human trafficking, that's pretty scary. That's incredibly scary. But it's like the angel told Joseph. He said, Joseph, don't be afraid. I mean, this is crazy. This is scary. I know you don't fully understand, but don't be afraid. I want you to do this. I want you to visit this situation. I want you to show up, and I want you to do something. And so for me, when I think about it and put all that together, I feel like as churches, we should be leading the charge for these situations. We should be leading the charge for the vulnerable, whether it's orphans, kids in foster care, birth moms that are, find themselves in a situation, I didn't plan on this, I don't think I can parent this, and, what are my options? What can I do? There's a culture that says, well, you just, we'll tell you what you can do. There's a clinic down the road, and we'll just take care of this. And we say, no, that's not the best answer. There's a much better answer. And I think we should lead that charge. And so for me, that's always kind of been the compelling thing. And of course, God saw fit in my own life and my own journey that we adopted 3 before we ever had kids. And we went down that road. We did it through private adoption, through the state, through agencies. And the only thing we haven't done is international. And so that's always been very near and dear to my heart. And so as a pastor, as a minister in a church setting, my mindset was, and this is why I guess I want to kind of encourage you guys as church planners, because you guys are the catalyst. In your churches, you're the catalyst. You're the guys that can give voice to this. And what I mean by that is I feel we're called as leaders to create a culture, to seek to create a culture within our churches that says we're going to care for these. We're going to visit. What can we do? And it may look different, but what can we do to have an impact on this situation? Now, you can't save 150 million orphans worldwide, but we can do something. And so I guess my argument, my plea is just you guys. Oftentimes on Sunday mornings, Andy Stanley said this one time. I'll say it on Sunday mornings, you guys are the most powerful voice in the room. You know what I'm saying? You're on the platform, the mic's on you, all eyes are on you. What you say, it's a powerful influence. It's a serious influence, right? I mean, it's nothing to be taken lightly. You can use that influence to help create a culture within your church. And one of the things we talked about, and what these ladies speak to this, is a lot of times, you start things like, man, okay, I'm already swamped. How am I now going to take on, impact, solving the issue of 150 million orphans worldwide? Or just, let's take it to the smallest number that I mentioned there, the 8,000 kids in foster care in my state. How in the world when am I going to fit that into my schedule? Well, I don't think necessarily you do. I think a big key to your role is giving voice to creating that culture. But what I would say you have to do is you have to pray and find those champions within your body. That it may be you, but it may not be you. It may be another couple. It may be another individual. Here in our context, the Lord sent Jamie and really became that champion for adoption, foster care, and just, and then several others came alongside, and we just started looking for ways to raise awareness, and there were years that, there was very little activity, but we were creating culture. And sometimes it takes time. But we stayed faithful to it, and we took opportunity. And Steve was always so gracious and has led the charge in a lot of ways here at the River. By himself being active in foster care. Of course, I had adopted, so I had firsthand knowledge there. But just giving the opportunities to speak and to raise awareness. And so that's a key, is for you, finding that champion within your church, someone who is very passionate, who God has put this on their heart, maybe even more so than yours. And they're going to be the one that maybe they're the Moses, maybe they're the one that God has burdened to go visit, to step up and do something. So, Jamie, you know firsthand that, and Crystal as well, and so maybe talk a little bit about that as far as what's that process look like? What are you looking for? How do you go about and that kind of thing? So.
Well, as Steve told you, I moved here almost 10 years ago, and I worked in foster care and adoptions in Florida, and that was my passion. I felt like that was my calling, and when God moved us here, I thought that was over. I don't know why, really. I just thought, I'm coming to this new place, nobody knows me, I'm not connected here. He's brought me here for a whole different reason. And very quickly as we were here, I realized that was not true. As literally I would be in restaurants or here at church, and literally I would have conversations going on behind me about foster care and adoption, and people not knowing a whole lot about it, just asking each other like, hey, I've been looking into this. And my husband, who is pretty much a quiet man, finally turned to me and said, if you don't turn around and get involved in these conversations, you're sinning. That is not his norm. So I knew at that point, that God had spoken. And so I began to just kind of start answering those questions. And then Steve and I got together, and we actually had gotten together for something completely different about children's ministry. And as I walked in and looked at the picture on his wall, I just thought, you have a really great sense of humor, Lord, because I saw his family picture and realized very quickly that he was an adoptive dad. And so just having those conversations, and honestly being, new to this area, if it wasn't for Steve and Steve giving me the avenue and the support to come through. As the Heart Gallery of Tennessee, one of the things that the church did was they have been our umbrella in their 501c3. We're now going forward to get our own 501c3, but that was very important for us to be able to start collecting money to host. So what we do is we have a physical display that goes around to churches and community organizations with the pictures of children who are available for adoption. We also have an online website with an online gallery showing the bios and the videos of these children and their dream for a forever family. We couldn't have done that. It seemed like at that point an impossible task to get a 501c3. And money-wise, it just wasn't there. And so they opened that up to us, and that was a huge, huge hurdle for us to jump. As well, they've invited us to speak. One of the things that, kind of is within the Christian movement is the Orphan Sunday in November. And they've put it within our church culture to celebrate that. They don't do it, we generally don't do it on the actual Orphan Sunday, which is fine. But they always set aside once a year a time to really focus on the orphan and what the needs of the orphan are. And so we, as Heart Gallery, get to be a part of that. And oftentimes, I'm sending Steve over information. He's asking, what's the latest information? What can I share? Or both Steves, actually. And so without them, I'm not really sure, how this would have looked. God's plan isn't going to stop, but they were very key in giving me the voice, giving me the opportunity and the platform to go forward in the call that God placed on my heart and doing this. And so, I remember Steve one time saying to me, You know, you need to let me know what's going on so we can make this, I think you said, an exclamation point instead of parentheses in our church. And over the last 6 years, we've seen an amazing rise in families getting involved in foster care and adoptions. When I first started talking to people about adoption and foster care in particular, people looked at me and said, the only people who are foster parents are people who really can't afford it. And these were Christians telling me, and I thought to myself, isn't there a problem with that? If they're doing this for the money, and I don't know if you know anything about the stipend you get in foster care, it is not much. There's a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
You know, and these children, the statistics for these children aging out of foster care, more and more they're getting caught up in sex trafficking.
Yeah.
They're in jail within 1 to 2 years of leaving the foster care system. They're, you know, involved in drugs and all kinds of dangerous behaviors. And so for the church to step in and say, we are going to take an active role in this because we love these kids. We're changing not just the trajectory, I don't know if that's how you say that word, but that part of their life, but we're changing generations. When I go to photo shoots and video shoots, oftentimes kids will ask me 2 questions. The first question is, why do you care about me? I don't know them. I've never met them. I'm not their caseworker. I'm not their therapist. I'm not their foster parent. But they realize that I'm coming to spend an entire day wrapped around their life to make it different. And so their question is, why do you care about me? And you know what I get to say to them? Because Jesus cares about you. And that changes everything.
Right.
And they go forward, and then the second question they ask me is, how quickly are you going to find me a family?
Wow.
6 years ago, very few churches would let us in the door.
Wow.
It just wasn't comfortable. I talk to Christians all the time, and their first question to me is, from a Christian family, is, what about my own kids? I was a foster sibling. I didn't grow up in foster care, but we had foster kids in my house. I watched my mom get her nose broke. My car was stolen and destroyed by a foster child. But you know what, at the end of the day, and my mom wasn't a Christian at the time, but you know what my mom told us? These kids don't know any better. We're here to show them something better.
Wow.
And as a church, that's what we can do. As an organization with an adoption, that's what we can do. That's what our families can do. We do have a responsibility to protect our children, our own children that God has given us. But we can't protect them so much that we're taking away opportunities God has to give them a blessing in their life. My mom and my dad being involved in foster care and adoption, watching those kids get adopted into families that my parents knew, planted the seeds of adoption in my heart. And that's where God began to grow and work. And then working with these birth moms, we've had the amazing opportunity of working with so many young women. We've been, in the last 2 months, we've been at an abusive women's shelter who have been abused, talking to a woman. We've been in jail on a regular basis, talking to young women. We've talked to young women who are homeless, who are addicted to drugs, and yet they want to bring this life to fruition, and they want to give this life something better than they've had. This is outreach. And somebody in your church will pick up this, or God has already planted a seed there. And maybe it's just your call to water it and say, we're going to have, a speaker come, like Crystal and I, or whoever it is, Tennessee Kids Belong, somebody within your own church that's already a foster family. Come and speak about it and watch that seed grow and watch the heart of your church change. There's nothing more amazing to me than watching a family come in with children that have not been in their home previously. And they're coming to church most of the time for the very first time because of that family. And they're hearing the gospel because of that family. Young women coming to us, they get to hear the gospel. That's first and foremost one of the things that we love to talk about with them and pray with them, is that God has a plan for your life. This part of your life that you see right here now, that you're immersed in, is not where you have to stay. You have a choice. And all you have to do is reach out and grab his hand, and he will take you to where you want to be, to where you need to be, to where he wants you to be. And then they're placing these babies in Christian homes so that they too can hear the gospel. It's generations. Generations. Sorry, I probably covered.
No, it's all good. We have them when it comes to foster care and adoption, and we just get involved, or hearing Jamie and Steve just share their story, and my own story of involvement with this. It's definitely not a comfortable thing to do when you're standing at that ledge of, Lord, I'm about to take a leap of faith and become involved in fostering a child or mentoring a child or even adopting a child, because we just want to consider the risk. And so for me, my background is in public health. I studied public health when after college, and so I come at things from a very practical, kind of like, what are some ways, like prevention. Public health is all about prevention. So if you can catch something on the front end, you can prevent these long-term effects. And so the same applies to children when it comes to child abuse and neglect. I'm very passionate about maternal and child welfare, and so that was kind of my goal when I got into public health, that I wanted to work with state agencies that could provide services and programs to children and their mothers, so as to keep to elevate the health of a mother, to elevate the health of a child. And from there, that launched very quickly into a job with the state, with DCS, with the Department of Children's Services. And you want to talk about eye-opening experiences. You want to talk about not just peeking behind the veil, but like ripping it open. This is what's going on in our communities. This is what is going on behind closed doors. Children being neglected, children being sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused. And I had that moment of, I need to just step back from this. I still have time. I can go back to my job in the chiropractor's office if I want to. But at the end of the day, I knew that the Lord had called me to leave Putnam County, which is where I was living, and I actually worked down in McMinnville for the first 6 months of my job with the state. And later moved up to a county closer to home. And so through that job, working with the state initially, doing a lot of investigations on child abuse, removing children from those situations, putting them into foster care in state's custody. And from there, moving into working with those children in foster care and becoming an adoption specialist, and looking at what are some ways that we can get these children out of foster care very quickly and help them to find permanency very quickly, because children do not belong in foster care. The state can meet those needs financially. The state can shelve it out, and they do that. It's a huge industry as far as the money that goes into supporting children in foster care. But what I would see is a lot of children, yes, aging out of custody with nothing, with none of that financial benefit. Unfortunately, some foster families were not putting that money aside for those children to give them a launch into life. And so, yes, instead of launching on their own and being independent, it was getting involved in finding community in ways that were not healthy for them. And unfortunately, yes, sex trafficking is a part of that. And so I just was so passionate in my job with the state about, who are the men and women that can just rise up to really meet not just the physical needs, but the spiritual needs of these children, because that is, as we know as believers, it's like just the mystery. I think a lot about the mystery of the gospel and how the Lord just works, and the deeper things of the Lord, and just how we experience that in our own life, and how, gosh, wouldn't it just be so amazing just to bring people along in this journey with us of experiencing those things. And I know that that's what you do as church planners. I know that, that call of the Lord to plant a church is to see the church grow, the kingdom grow. You're doing that kingdom work. And so being in that position with the state, seeing kind of both sides of it, really feel that desire to see some very practical things get put into place for families in our community, for reaching those unreached. We talk about people group from a NAM perspective or from an IMB perspective, and it's like, oh yeah, there are millions of populations, millions of people that are unreached across our world. But what about in your community? Like, who are the unreached communities, and how can you harness your church to really meet those needs? It doesn't necessarily have to be foster care. It doesn't necessarily have to be adoption, but it could just be creating an opportunity for families to come and engage that just would meet those very practical needs. Sadly, children can come into foster care for environmental neglect. For instance, the home is just not clean. There's not any running water in the home. There's no electricity. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that these children are being abused, but maybe it's because mom and dad lost his job. So now we have to get involved, and we have to start putting the pressure on this family to, you need to start getting some income, or else we're going to bring your children into foster care. That is not their intention at all, to put their children in a situation to where the state's got to come in and take them. So what can we as the church do to meet those needs, to go above and beyond what's already in place as far as community organizations? Because there are great organizations that are out there to help meet those needs. UCHRA here in the Upper Cumberland, they provide scholarships for families, $500. You just go and you apply. You can get $500 towards your electric bill to pay that bill. Well, that's great. That's the physical need that's met. But what about the spiritual needs? What about the discipling? What about the mentorship that's going to allow this family to actually see the beauty of perhaps maybe just setting some small goals? Maybe it's just getting on a budget. Like those things that are just very practical and that can keep families from being or getting into a moment of crisis. And so what I have seen through my own experience and through my own church is that we just take that responsibility very serious. I'm a part of a church plant that planted about 7 years ago, well 8 years ago now, here in Cookeville. And my pastor felt very strongly about just getting involved in our community in some way, and that being very sustainable, not just going and doing something and then pulling out. And so what we have chosen to do is we have chosen to renovate these storage spaces over in a mobile home community here in town. And for the last 5 to 6 years, we've been running a little community center there to where families can come and get their laundry washed. They can come, their children get homework help. They're fed lunches through the school year. They're on Tuesday nights. There's a certain program for children to come. And these are children coming from very abusive, neglectful homes. And our hope is to, obviously, we don't want those children going back to those circumstances, but we know that if we can at least just be a buffer and be that safe place for them, they know that they can trust us, they can come to us. We still have to report and make reports of child abuse and neglect, and sadly some of those children do go into foster care. But it's just taking that step to get involved in that way. And it's not going to look the same for every church, but what are the practical ways that you can get involved, or that you can equip your body to be involved in the community and to just be a sustainable presence wherever you are and wherever you're serving. And so that's just something, a passion that obviously I bring to Hope Center. What are the things that we are doing with the families, especially the birth families that are coming to us, that's going to give them that practical help that they need to not find themselves back in a crisis situation. So how are we empowering, how are we equipping these birth mothers to go out after they've made this adoption plan to place their child for adoption, to give them the best start? Because for some it's a turning point. For some it's, this has never been modeled for me, and you would find that with a lot of the families that you may come into contact to meet those practical needs, it's not ever been modeled for them to set up a budget, to set those small goals. It's just been lacking in their life for whatever reason. But you have the power and just the ability to be able to go out, having experienced those things yourself as far as making those wise decisions, and just mentor and just shepherd and just disciple. Discipleship just isn't for the church, being in the four walls of these church and the people in your small group. Like, it has got to happen, I feel like, at every level in our communities, to rise up men and women to prevent that cycle of abuse, neglect, trauma, all of those things that just feed into that negative cycle that leaves families at a place of crisis. And so we as a church, I believe we just have the power to do that. We have the people to do that. And like Steve said, it may not be you doing it, like you've got a lot going on as pastors, but just believing that the opportunity, if you can present the opportunity, create the opportunity, that there is someone within your body, many within your body, that, oh yeah, that's on my heart as well. And we all know, like, that inescapable place when the Lord is calling us to something, that place of like, oh, just, Lord, really? Are you really? And like, we'll pray about it, and we'll pray about it, and we'll pray about it, and we come back to that same place. So, yes, I've called you to do this. And surrendering and just saying, okay, Lord, I just lay this at your feet. And I just, the analogy I always come to is like that cliff. I'm about to jump off this cliff of faith, Lord, and trust that you're going to catch me, that wherever I land, Father, it is where you have me to be. And that's scary when you have families of your own. For me, it was leaving the state and coming into this. Being a nonprofit leader, I had no idea what that was about when I did this, and it was leaving great benefits, and I have a 2-year-old child, you know, like he needs dental insurance, I need dental insurance, you know, like all of those things that were going through my mind. But I tell you what, the Lord's constant provision through this, it continually affirms when you put yourself out there, when you just step into that opportunity that He's first and foremost created. He's going to bless you, and it's going to come sometimes in the most unexpected ways. And thankfully, my child has dental insurance now, and so do I. So I don't know why I was worried about it.
Amen.
But it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah. Faith is just a beautiful thing. And the story of Abraham just continually comes up this week. It's been coming up this week. Spoke about it on Sunday at a church. And just how the Lord just called him from a place to go to a place that he had no idea of. And the Lord just said, I'm going to bless you. And I feel like it's the same. You know, the Lord, He's unchanging, that unchanging nature. Like He's going to bless you. And we can walk confidently in that. And so we just have such a commonality amongst us. You know, as believers, as church planners, as adoption agency planners, the Lord wants to bless these families. We have the power and the place to speak that truth into their life every single day. Are we willing to take that opportunity and do so? So,
again, I think it's just saying after all of that your job is to just expose. Yes. You know, I mean, well, let me say this: your job may just be. I don't know. You may be called to this.
Sure.
Ben. No, I'm just kidding. Because I know you're an adopted dad. And Tim is one of our families. But yes. As church planters, you know, just exposing your congregation to this. You know, that's the beauty of all this, is there is a network that as church planters you can tap into to be that exposure, to help your congregation understand this, to assimilate it into the culture of your church. And we've got kind of all the resources here that you would need to do that. This sheet that we'll pass out is just a list that you can give out to congregation members that say, you know, I'm interested in this. You know, one of the things that Steve and I talked about when we first got together was, I said, if you just need a list of, or like a packet to hand out to people when they ask you, I'd be happy to make that up. And so those places, that's not an exhaustive list because I didn't want to overwhelm anybody, but that's a jumping off point. Anybody who says, you know, whether you're in Memphis or in Kingsport, you know, if you have a congregation member that says, I'm interested in adoption, feel free to have them call us. Most likely we won't be able to serve them physically because of the location, but we can get them in contact with an adoption agency that's reputable, and help them understand what that process will look like. That's probably one of the biggest things is, you know, families go online and they look and there's, you know, 850 million pages of information. How do I narrow it down to the one? You know, and so all the resources on there are really just a jumping off point. You know, I always say this statistic because it just really gets my heart. 1 in 3 families have considered adoption as a means to build their family. And do you know the first place they go? Their place of worship. That's where they go for information, their place of worship. We want you guys to have the information when they come to you that you can say, oh, you want to be involved in foster care? Call this crazy lady, Jamie Thornsberry, at this number. She'll talk to you for days if you want. Call her 800 times. She'll talk to you for days. You want to adopt, you want to add a child to your family through adoption, maybe you've been struggling with infertility, whatever it is. Call these people over here. Call Crystal and Jamie over at the Hope Center. They'll help you. We're not here just to bring families into Hope Center. We're called as a ministry to nurture forever families through Christ-centered counseling and adoption services. I don't care where they are. We've had calls from Alaska, we've had calls from New York, Massachusetts, and the help that we've been able to give them is to point them towards reputable agencies that will fulfill what they've said they will fulfill. Oftentimes that's the hardest part.
So, what you see here is two women that are very passionate about this, and that was the prayer. As a minister, it's like, I need someone to champion this, to help me champion this, to help raise this awareness. Crystal represents, in her former life, what we saw as an opportunity as a church to connect with local organizations. Okay. And when we would do like the Orphan Awareness Sundays or whatever, we would always invite Department of Children's Services. There's an organization in town called Youth Villages. Any organization, Lighthouse Christian Camp, they work with underprivileged kids in the region. Any organization that was doing something, we would invite them to come and set up tables in our lobby, and we would direct our folks there. And it's always neat after those services then to see folks out in the lobby talking with these organizations, because you never know what God might be doing, what He's putting on someone's heart to do, and you're helping connect that. So as a church planner, and our heart to reach people, well, there's a lot of people to be reached. I oftentimes looked at it even when we would invite these organizations that weren't even really Christian organizations. But we're having an opportunity to develop a relationship with these caseworkers from the Department of Children's Services, with these organizations, and let them know, hey, as a church, I don't know what your perception is, but we want you to know that we do care. This situation that you're engaged in, we care about it too. So as you're thinking about that, again, just looking for that and praying for a champion, somebody that's passionate about it, that will do a lot of that work. Jamie was already doing this and getting involved and making the connections with the local organizations and stuff. And so when we would do one of these awareness Sundays, I would reach out and I'd say, Jamie, who can we invite to come and set up a booth? And she'd start rattling off names, all so-and-so's with CASA and so-and-so's with it. It's like, yeah, invite them to come and set up. And most of these organizations are looking for those opportunities. We've been surprised how the Department of Children's Services has been so open and welcoming, of us wanting. And it's led to, in a lot of ways, it's led to us being, I feel like, involved in conversations that normally we wouldn't even have any place at the table in. But because we were willing to do that work of building relationships and doing connections. So that's a huge thing. So I want to make sure that we allow time here just for like some Q&A, I know several of you in here are familiar with adoption and foster care and that kind of thing, and so maybe you've got questions and things. My biggest thing, I guess, for you is just, to prayerfully consider, am I willing to kind of be that catalyst and say, I know I can certainly raise awareness within my church. I can certainly, do things to start building connections, and we can certainly help you set that up. What does that look like practically to have an awareness Sunday? We have a lot of things that we've done over the years and ways to do that to raise, and again, sometimes you're having this service and you're praying, God, let somebody sitting out there this morning hear this, that's that champion that says, hey, I'm so glad you finally said something about this, because this is my heart. So I'm going to take some water. So let's just open it up if you have questions or something you'd like to ask or throw out.
My name's Nick Swartz. I'm the campus pastor at the King's Academy right outside Knoxville, Tennessee. Have you guys seen, and what would that look like for a Christian private school with a boarding program like ours to partner with an adoption agency like yours? Is that...
What would that look like?
Yeah, is that something that, potential foster parents or potential adoptive parents, maybe that would pique their interest, and the school kind of come alongside you and help support, in this kind of raising this child, because we really take a Christ-centered approach to education, and really trying to help put parents in the driver's seat for the discipleship of their children, but more from the educational perspective. And then those kids are on campus 5 days a week, so really every hour they're in school is an opportunity to disciple them. So what would that look like to be able to partner? Has that come across?
No, but it's exciting. We'd love to.
Yeah. Well, and I guess one thing that kind of comes to my mind is, what ages are...
So we're pre-K 4 through 12th grade.
Okay.
And our enrollment's at 460 something right now, with about 150 of those being high school, a little over 100 being middle school, and the rest being elementary school students. And then our boarding program, we have beds for 200 students. And last year our enrollment was down to about 36 students that were representing 15 different countries. And then this year we're up to about 60 students representing 17 different countries. So there's still a lot of room for growth in that boarding program. And we do have some 5-day boarders that come that will stay just for the day, for the week, and then go home on the weekends. And that kind of helps, you know, because we've got a couple kids from inner city in Knoxville that take advantage of that program as well. So I don't know, as you guys are talking, I'm like, this seems awesome, and I just want to kind of toss that out there and get your feedback on it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that warrants maybe a deeper conversation of what that would look like, either for children in foster care or for the families that we work with.
Right, okay, great.
So.
And one thing too, I mean, and I'm not exactly sure, but you know, even like there's a concept in foster care called wraparound ministry, which is basically the concept of coming around foster families and supporting them. We started a thing here at the church, and just like a little closet, and we were going to our small groups and saying, hey, would you put together a backpack? Because oftentimes a family will get a foster child and they have no idea. They're qualified, they've done the training, and their house is open, but they don't always know, like, am I going to get a 4-year-old boy, a 7-year-old girl? So like what? So we would have we created all these different backpacks that, like, hey, this is for, like, you've got a little girl that's, you know, size 7, and so they would put these backpacks together. Then some other folks in the community, it's kind of expanded, and we've just joined forces with them. They've got a whole building, but it's that concept of coming around them and just saying, here's some tangible ways to help. So, you know, it could be a student drive to, like, you know,
to collect backpacks.
Yes, or stuff like that you could be saying, hey, these are going to go to help foster kids in our community.
Absolutely.
So that would be just a very simple, practical, you know, type of thing. If you think about even like Compassion International and sponsoring a kid, or the
World Vision?
No, the shoe boxes, you know.
Operation Christmas.
Operation Christmas Child, yes. You know, those are very tangible things that a lot of people can get involved in. And truly it's a huge blessing, you know, to families that find themselves scrambling, like, we don't have any size 6 boy shoes, you know. And so if you can hand them a backpack that says, hey, here's a couple pair of pants, some shoes, you know, I mean, that's a huge, that'll get you through maybe the first 48 hours, you know, and so that's huge. So that's just off the top of my head, that would be something.
It's really good.
Do you have any connection with the Department of Children's Services, like the Knox County, anyone there? Do you know of anyone?
Not really. No.
Okay.
I've had to call DCS one time, but other than that, I don't have any real connection.
Okay. Well, and the reason why I ask is because Knox, that county, is just they're just very passionate about, obviously, about children, but a lot of like trauma-informed care. And so making that connection, and this was saying like that wraparound ministry, they would be very open to that as well. So that would just be a really great connection to have, and it could lead to some other opportunities.
And that's the DCS of Knoxville?
It is. I can get you the contact information.
Yeah, and you can go on the website that's on there, tnfosters.gov, and there's a link on there that will bring you to the numbers of all the different counties.
Awesome.
Thank you guys for your presentations. It's very informative. Just a couple of questions, well, one question. As you're speaking to church planners, and I'm excited to hear the story, and I'm thankful to be a part of the river and the culture that has already been created for fostering and adoptions, and it's certainly near and dear to my heart. But as you're speaking to someone, and you know, some of these guys, and myself included, as we're in a smaller environment trying to begin the process of setting precedent for a culture that is responsive to this kind of thing, do you have any maybe baby step kind of suggestions, you know, 1 or 2 things that you would suggest that as church planters and leaders that you would say, hey, these are some really good initial steps that you could take to make sure that this is communicated well?
Sure, that's a great question. We were at that same point with Hope Center when we initially opened our doors. So, you know, we have this huge task that we want to accomplish, but what are the initial steps that we can take to just get our name out in the community. And one thing that has worked well for us is an information seminar. That's something that, you don't have to pay to advertise it. You can put it on Facebook. And we would do that. And so we would, through our relationships with local churches, we didn't have a building. We were at First Baptist Church. They let us use an office space there. But we just reached out to other churches around the community and said, hey, if we had like a 2-hour time frame on a Saturday morning where we could just come, utilize your space, and invite the community in to share about Hope Center, is that something that you guys would be willing to let us do? And churches were very receptive to that. And so for us, it was, it was minimal work as far as we didn't need a lot of manpower. Typically there are tables, there are chairs there, but it was just an opportunity to open the door to the community or with your church body to say, hey, do you know anyone? We're going to have this on a Saturday at the church from 10 to 12. We'll serve a light brunch, we'll serve some coffee, we'll serve some juice, and we'll just do a simple presentation of this is our heart. These are some of the areas that we know that we could possibly, just look into, and let's just pray about this. And from there, it's like the snowball, like it just got bigger and bigger because more and more people started to come into contact with our services just through that very simple thing of having an information seminar. Very informal thing to do, and it's for most families, like we're very kid friendly, and so families would bring their children, and that's a huge thing. Childcare, we can't, sometimes Saturdays are family days and families just want to be together in whatever they're doing. So again, meeting those practical needs, and that was just one way to meet a practical need and get information out at the same time. So that was my suggestion. It's a great place to start.
I think for me here at the River, one of the real catalysts, I think, for our church creating that culture was giving that one time a year where Steve would specifically focus on in their sermon the needs of the orphan. And like Steve said, inviting organizations. We always have the Heart Gallery there, now Hope Center's there. We've always had DCS workers there. And a couple of years ago, we added to that generally right after that, the church offered to host a PATH training for foster care. And it was really just opening up our building to, DCS or Tennessee Baptist Children's Home to say, come, offer a training here. We'll put it out to our body, just like the Hope Adoption Information Seminar, and get your body involved. And it also brought people into the church because so many, those organizations would hold the actual event here in our church, but they would invite the entire community. That's the beauty of these relationships, is that not only are you introducing an organization to the love of Christ, but you're also letting your community know this is something we value. Children and families is something we value. We value it so much, we want to open up our space to them. And so the community is coming in and seeing that. And the minimal work on you is just being there to open the door on a Saturday morning or a Tuesday night, whenever that training is. But giving that space of time once a year to say, as a church, once a year, we are going to focus on this right here, this command of God right here, to serve the orphans, to visit them, and then giving your body an opportunity to do that through inviting those people to come in, those experts to come in and be available in your lobby, or to say a few words during or after your sermon, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think that's that's what you can do. I mean, most of you guys are probably involved in the planning of services at your church, and so you pick a Sunday and just say, no, we're going to focus on this. Find somebody that's done it and videotape their testimony. Just them sharing what foster parenting has been like for them, or what the adoption journey was like, or whatever it may be. Stories are powerful, and just have someone sharing their story, and you can raise that awareness, and then invite people, and it's a great way. It is a great way to make connections. I mean, there are agencies in your community that do this kind of stuff, or there's Partnership Services, nonprofit organizations that work with kids. They are always, if you invite them to come, they love doing that. And the cool thing was here, of course, we had 2 services, so a lot of times they would actually come and sit through the service, and so that's huge. You got people that may or may not be believers You know, they don't always do that. Sometimes they find out when is your service going to be over, and that's when I'll show up, and that's okay. But yeah, that's a very simple thing you can do. And just, again, you're raising awareness. And you don't, I mean, honestly, you don't want to try to take on this big, massive, and we're going to start an adoption ministry, or we're going to start, I mean, you know, again, you got to have the champion. You got to have the people that's going to see it through. And then just creating that culture, and that takes time. I mean, like I say, this has been years. You know, the things we're doing now didn't happen overnight, didn't happen in a year. It was just a consistent, you know, sometimes about all we did was there'd be a Sunday, we'd raise awareness. You know, and then we said, what if we did offer path classes? And just said, hey, we'll offer path classes. You know, anybody wants to go through the classes. Sometimes we'd have 10 families, sometimes we might have 2. But, you know, so that's a very easy thing to do. Partnering with the local organizations certainly is something you can do to kind of raise the awareness, create that culture. You know, again, I think the thing with just even like what we talked about earlier, the idea of visiting, you've got to give next steps. You've got to give action points. If you just talk about it, talk about the need and the need, but you never give people, because it's overwhelming. I mean, sometimes they'll hear this and they'll be like, even like to your point, it's like, man, we could do something. I have no idea what.
Right.
So you can give them some practical next steps. Where it's like, hey, we're offering path classes, or we're going to have an information seminar, you know, tonight. You know, come join us, and if you want to learn more, or if you have questions, this is the time to do that. I think you always want to make sure you follow up with action steps. You know, what's next? If this is maybe something God's put on your heart, what's the next step? That's huge. So we got just a couple minutes, I think. So any other questions or things you guys want to ask about, or?
Are y'all willing to come to churches, even if it's an hour and a half drive to speak? Yeah.
We are. So Duke Midville, with Pastor Kevin, went down there about a month ago just to meet with him and his wife and Tim and just talk through. And we're going to be going back on a Sunday when we can find a date, hopefully in the month of September, that we'll be there. But yeah, we are willing to travel. We just want to be there to meet the need, to give information, to raise awareness. That's always the perspective that we're going to take, and every opportunity is a chance to elevate that awareness of just what's going on. You know, I mean, of foster care, adoption, but really it's just a discipleship. Like we want to just come alongside our communities, and we want to do that well and partner well. And so any opportunity we have to share that, we will take it.
I want to give you guys one last encouragement if nobody has another question. So I look at church pastors like fire starters. Y'all are that fire starter for your congregation. And if you never put flame, you know, to a bit of kindling, it's never going to start on fire. And so you guys are that. And I always love this story. There's a pastor out in this little tiny town called Possum Trot, Texas. He had a congregation of less than 50, mostly older folks in his congregation. And he and his wife started praying about foster care and adoption. And from that simple prayer that they prayed, now every single family, and their lower middle income families, are involved in foster care and adoption in some way. They've almost wiped out the foster care system in Possum Trot, Texas, because this pastor stood up and just gave awareness to his congregation. If we could see those little fires happening all over the state of Tennessee, seeing these kids put in Christian homes where they can hear the gospel, not just hear it, but know what that gospel looks like in the flesh.
Yeah.
Think of where we will be in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, what the next generation will look like. And it's only because you're opening your door to say, come speak about your passion. Come share the passion that God has given you by once a year, just once a year.
Yeah, that's good. You know, and I think just again, guys, using your platform. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, you pray and seek the Lord's direction on that, but I do think this is something that's very near to the heart of God, and to use your platform to say, hey guys, these people matter to God. They ought to matter to His people. Yeah. And we have resources. You know, and hey, I get it. I mean, you know, sometimes you're starting out and you're thinking, I don't have a lot of resources. But you know what, there's a lot of things you can do. One of the things, you know, a couple of other quick ideas. The Both Hands Project is something we've done here. It's where it's both hands, one hand for the widow and one hand for the orphan. You put together a team of men, you find a widow in your community and say, hey, we want to come out and just bless you. And you know, your porch needs rebuilding, or the lot is so grown up, and you have a work day basically. And you come out and you take care of that need. But while you're doing that, you ask everybody involved to send out letters to friends and family and say, will you sponsor me? You know, not to go play 9 holes of golf out here, but will you sponsor me for about 4 hours of work? We're going to help this widow, and all the money that we raise, we're going to give, you know, to an adoption fund, or you know, to help, you know, with a wraparound ministry or something like that, from orphan care ministry. It's a little thing like that basically communicates to your body, this matters, this is important, and so we're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
So things like that, getting involved in wraparound, you know, we talked about with your school, but your church could do that.
Right.
Say, hey, we're going to put backpacks together for foster kids. You know, here's what you need to put in there. You know, and maybe you do that. You know, you pick a season each year that that's something we do as a body. People get excited about that stuff. You know, because I've always said, I think every Christian home should prayerfully consider foster care, adoption.
Yeah.
Not every home should do it, but I think every home should pray about it.
Yeah.
And what's God calling me to do? And He may be calling you to foster, to adopt. He may be calling you to come alongside, wrap around, and help support. You know, but whatever it is. But just use your platform to raise that awareness. And again, any way we can help you, and you know, you guys know Steve over here, and he's always got ideas. So I mean, we can certainly help you come up with things, anything we can do, and these folks at the Hope Center, we're very excited about that, and you know, just absolutely any way we can help, be happy to do it, guys. So yes.